Ethan had always been the kind of person who kept his thoughts quiet and his dreams big. He grew up in a busy city where everyone rushed and no one truly looked at anyone else. After years of working the same office job, spending long hours behind a screen, and feeling like the days were just repeating themselves, he reached a point where he knew he needed a change. He wanted space, peace, something real he could touch with his hands. He wanted to wake up to fresh air instead of traffic noise. One evening, after a tiring day, he sat in his small apartment scrolling through property listings. He didn't know what exactly he was looking for. He clicked through houses, apartments, and empty lots that were far too expensive. Then, almost like a joke, a listing appeared with a price that made him blink twice. $1. He clicked on it, assuming it had to be some sort of mistake. The listing showed an old ranch sitting alone on open land. The photos had faded colors, like they were taken years earlier. The house looked worn out, but still strong. The yard was large, the grass yellow and uncut, stretching in every direction. There was a small barn behind the house, and fields that looked like they had stories of their own. It was not pretty in the traditional sense, but something about it felt peaceful. Something about it felt like a new beginning. At first, Ethan laughed. $1? Impossible, he whispered to himself. But curiosity pushed him to read more. The description said the ranch had been empty for a long time. The previous owner had left suddenly. The property needed repairs, and the buyer must agree to fix it within a certain time. That explained the cheap price. But it also said something else. Locals avoided the ranch because they claimed they heard strange sounds at night. Lights turning on by themselves, doors opening, whispers of the place being unsettled. Ethan was not the type to believe in such stories. He had lived in the city long enough to know people loved to exaggerate, especially in small towns. So instead of feeling scared, he felt even more curious. He imagined himself waking up early, restoring the ranch slowly, fixing one room at a time, working with his hands instead of a computer. He could feel something inside him stirring, excitement mixed with a little fear, but in a good way. The kind of fear that comes with change. The next weekend, he drove out to see the ranch in person. The road was long and quiet. Fields passed by his window like slow-moving waves. The farther he went from the city, the calmer he felt. When he finally reached the dirt road that led to the ranch, he stopped for a moment just to take in the view. The land looked endless. The sky stretched wide, soft orange from the setting sun. When he reached the ranch, he stepped out of his car and listened. Nothing. Just wind. No car horns, no people shouting, no rushing footsteps. The silence felt strange at first, almost too quiet, but then it settled around him like a blanket. The house looked even older than the photos. The paint had chipped away, the porch creaked when he stepped on it, and the front door had a slight tilt. But there was something warm about it, something that reminded him of forgotten stories waiting to be told. He walked around slowly, checking the walls, peeking through windows covered with dust. Even though everything looked abandoned, it didn't feel empty. It felt lived in, like someone had stepped out only moments before. He didn't know why, but he felt drawn to it. Even when he saw broken tiles, peeling wallpaper, and old furniture left behind in strange positions, none of it scared him away. Instead, he imagined what it could become. A real estate agent met him at the gate a few minutes later. She was a friendly, middle-aged woman who seemed almost amused that he was interested in the ranch. "Most people don't even come to see it," she said with a small smile. "The price scares them more than it attracts them." "The price?" he asked, raising an eyebrow. She laughed. "Yes. $1 makes them think something must be terribly wrong with it." He nodded. It did sound unusual. But standing there, the place didn't feel wrong. It just felt forgotten. The agent walked him through the house. The inside was dusty but not damaged beyond repair. The living room had old wooden floors that groaned under their own age. In the kitchen, the cupboards hung slightly off their hinges. The bedrooms were small but filled with soft light. The attic door was slightly open, which the agent quickly closed without commenting. As they walked, she shared bits of the ranch's history. The previous owner had lived alone, an older man who kept to himself. One day, he simply left. No goodbye, no explanation. The town tried to contact him, but he had moved across the country and wanted nothing more to do with the place. Before leaving, he donated the property to the town with one request: give it to someone who needs a fresh start. The story touched Ethan more than he expected. Maybe the old man had felt the same way he did, tired of noise, wanting peace. When they stepped outside again, the sun had set and a cool breeze passed by. The ranch looked calm, almost welcoming. "So?" the agent asked. "Do you want it?" Ethan looked at the house, the barn, the wide land, and the sky above. He felt something settle in his heart, something that said yes, even before he opened his mouth. "I'll take it," he said simply. The agent seemed surprised but pleased. "All right then, $1, and it's yours." Signing the papers felt surreal. He couldn't believe that with a simple signature and a coin, he now owned a ranch. The idea felt huge, like stepping into a different life. As he drove back to the city that night, he kept glancing at the paper beside him, half afraid it would disappear, half thrilled that it wouldn't. Over the next week, Ethan packed his belongings. He didn't have much: some clothes, tools, books, and a few things he had collected over the years. He told his landlord he was leaving, and the landlord looked at him with a mix of surprise and confusion. "You're moving to a ranch?" he asked. Ethan nodded, and the landlord laughed softly. "Well, good luck. Sounds peaceful." Ethan smiled. That was exactly what he wanted. When he finally moved to the ranch, he felt a mix of excitement and nervousness. He knew it wouldn't be easy. The house needed work, the land needed clearing, and he had no experience with ranch life, but he promised himself he would try, step by step. On his first night there, after unpacking, he sat on the porch with a warm drink. The stars above were bright, clearer than he had ever seen in the city. The wind carried the scent of dry grass and soil. Everything felt calm. But in the quiet, he heard something, a soft, rustling sound from inside the house. He froze for a moment, listening carefully. Maybe it was an animal, a mouse, a bird, something small. Old houses always made noise, he reminded himself. He shrugged it off and went inside to check, expecting to find nothing. But the thing that confused him was that the noise stopped the moment he stepped inside. The house was still, too still. He walked through the rooms, turning on the small flashlight he carried. The light swept across the walls, the floors, the old furniture. Nothing moved. Nothing seemed out of place. He told himself not to overthink. Perhaps the wind pushed something, or an old board shifted. These things happened in empty houses. He returned to the porch, but the feeling of being watched stayed with him, soft but noticeable. Later that night, when he went to sleep, he felt the same thing, like the ranch was not as empty as it looked. But he didn't feel scared. The feeling was strange, yes, but not threatening. More like someone was observing him quietly, trying to understand him. When he woke up the next morning, he found his toolbox slightly moved from where he left it. Not a lot, just enough to notice. A few tools were placed neatly beside it, almost as if someone had tried to organize them. He stared at the tools for a long time. He knew he hadn't moved them. "Maybe I placed them like this and forgot," he whispered to himself, though even he didn't believe it. He took a deep breath and went outside to start cleaning the yard. The sun was bright, the air crisp, and the land around him felt open and full of possibilities. As he worked, he couldn't shake the thought that he was not completely alone on the ranch. He didn't know it yet, but someone else had been watching him since the moment he bought the place. Someone who had been living quietly, silently, hidden away in the corners of the ranch long before he arrived, and soon he was going to meet her. Ethan woke up early the next morning, ready to begin working on the ranch. The sunlight slipped through the thin curtains, touching the floor with a soft golden glow. He stretched, feeling a little tired from the previous day, but also excited. The idea of having an entire ranch to restore still felt unreal, like a dream he had accidentally stepped into. He made himself a simple breakfast and walked out to the porch. The air was cool, fresh, and calming. Birds were chirping somewhere far off. The land around him was wide and quiet, and for a moment, everything felt peaceful again. The strange noises from last night seemed like nothing more than the house settling, just normal old house sounds. But as he stepped down to pick up his toolbox, he paused. Some of the tools were not where he remembered leaving them. He stared at them for a long moment. 3 small tools had been placed neatly beside the box, arranged almost too carefully. Ethan frowned slightly. He was sure he hadn't put them like that. "It's fine," he told himself softly. "I must have arranged them last night when I was tired." He didn't want to start his morning feeling uneasy, so he picked up the tools and began working outside. The hours passed quickly as he cleared dry branches, swept leaves, and tried to bring some order to the place. He loved the feeling of using his hands, the sense that he was slowly giving life back to something forgotten. But strange moments continued throughout the day. When he returned to the kitchen to drink water, he noticed the back door was slightly open. He remembered closing it earlier. Inside, one of the old chairs had been moved from the wall to the center of the room. Not a big movement, but enough to catch his attention. He stood still for a moment, looking around the kitchen with careful eyes. Everything was quiet. Nothing seemed out of place except that one chair. "Maybe the wind pushed it," he whispered, though even he knew that a chair so heavy wouldn't move from just the wind. Still, he didn't want to jump to strange conclusions. He had just moved into the ranch. Everything was new to him. Maybe he was simply noticing things more closely than usual. But by the afternoon, things became harder to ignore. Ethan decided to check around the barn. The building looked old but not broken. Its wooden door creaked when he pushed it open. Inside, dust floated in the soft light, and the air smelled of old hay. He walked around slowly, enjoying the quietness. Then suddenly, he noticed something unusual, a small, empty food can hidden behind a stack of wooden crates. It wasn't dusty. It looked new. He picked it up and turned it around in his hands. Someone must have eaten this recently. He set it back down and took a slow breath. He didn't know what to think. Had someone been using this place? Was there a traveler who took shelter here, a worker from the town? Or maybe an animal dragged it in? He wasn't sure, but something inside him felt alert. That night, after finishing his work, he sat in the living room reading an old book he had brought with him. The house was mostly quiet, except for the occasional creak from the wooden walls. It wasn't frightening, just the usual sound of an old home. He began to relax. But then he heard it again. Soft footsteps. Not heavy, not loud, just a gentle movement, almost like someone trying not to make noise. He looked up from his book. The sound seemed to be coming from the hallway outside the room. Ethan slowly set his book aside. He listened carefully. The footsteps paused, continued, then stopped again. He stood up and walked to the hallway, turning on the small light. No one was there. He moved quietly from one room to another, checking each one. Everything was still. Everything was in place. It made no sense. He hadn't seen a person since moving here, yet the feeling of presence grew stronger. "Maybe I'm tired," he whispered. "Maybe I'm imagining too much." The next morning, Ethan decided he needed to understand what was happening. If someone was living secretly on his property, he needed to help them, talk to them, or at least know about them. He wasn't angry, more curious and concerned. He began searching carefully around the ranch, behind the kitchen cabinets, under the stairs, in the attic. Everywhere he looked was dusty and still. But near the side of the house, behind an old wooden board, he noticed footprints, small ones. Not heavy like a man's, not large like a worker's boots, smaller, lighter. He followed the footprints a short distance until they disappeared near the barn. Something inside him tightened. Someone had been here recently. Someone who didn't want to be seen. Later that afternoon, after finishing some repairs, Ethan sat under a tree near the barn drinking water. The wind was gentle, carrying the smell of grass. Everything was calm until he heard the soft crunch of leaves behind the barn. He stood slowly, not wanting to scare anyone. He didn't speak at first. He listened. The sound repeated. Very quiet footsteps. As he walked around the barn, he saw a quick flash of movement. Someone small and fast darted behind the storage shed. "Hello," Ethan called gently. "I'm not going to hurt you." No response, but the silence felt heavy, like someone was holding their breath. "It's okay," he said again, his voice calm. "If you need help, I can help you." Still nothing. Ethan didn't chase. He didn't want to frighten whoever it was. Instead, he returned to the house, hoping that giving them space would make them feel safer. That night, something happened that changed everything. Ethan woke up thirsty and walked to the kitchen to drink water. As he turned on the light, his eyes went straight to the countertop. One of the plates he had washed earlier was missing. He looked around and then noticed something else. A small shadow moving near the back door. He stopped instantly. A figure froze too. Thin, small, trembling slightly. "Wait," Ethan said softly. "It's okay." The figure didn't run this time. Instead, it stepped back only a little, keeping its distance. Ethan kept his voice low, warm, and steady. "I know you've been around here," he said. "You took some food. That's all right. I'm not angry." Slowly, the shadow moved into the light. It was a young girl. She looked no older than 17 or 18, maybe younger. Her clothes were worn, her hair slightly messy, and her eyes were wide with fear and uncertainty. She held the missing plate in her shaking hands as if she wasn't sure whether to keep it or put it down. Ethan felt a wave of sympathy instead of fear. She looked lost. She looked tired. She looked like someone who had been hiding for a long time. He stepped back slightly to give her space. "You don't have to run," he said gently. "You're safe here." She didn't say anything. Her lips pressed tightly together and her eyes kept shifting toward the door as if she was ready to escape at any moment. But she didn't run. She stood there, breathing fast, watching him closely. "My name is Ethan," he said slowly. "I live here now." He pointed lightly around the kitchen. "This is my home." She swallowed hard but said nothing. He took a small step to the side, not toward her. "If you're hungry, you can eat. I don't mind. I won't force you to say anything." Finally, she whispered, almost too softly to hear, "I'm sorry." Her voice shook. She quickly put the plate down on the table as if she felt guilty. "You don't have to be sorry," Ethan replied gently. "If you need help, I can listen." She hesitated. Her eyes filled with uncertainty again. But there was something else too, a tiny bit of hope. She looked at him for a long moment, her expression softening just a little. "My name," she said slowly, "is Maya." Ethan nodded kindly. "Hi, Maya." She didn't smile, but she didn't run either. A small but important beginning. Ethan realized then that Maya had been living on the ranch long before he arrived, hiding, surviving, trying not to be found. And now she was standing in front of him, scared, but brave enough to show herself. Everything that had confused him, the food, the tools, the footsteps, suddenly made sense. Maya had been the hidden presence in the house, and from that moment, Ethan's life on the ranch was no longer quiet or isolated. Something unexpected had entered his world, something that would change both their lives. The morning after Ethan found Maya in the kitchen, he woke up feeling different. It was not fear or worry, it was something softer, something that felt like responsibility mixed with curiosity. He kept thinking about her scared eyes, the way she held the plate, the quiet way she whispered her name. He wondered where she had come from, how long she had been living on the ranch, and what she had gone through. She looked too young to be alone out here, too fragile to survive in an empty house without help. But she had survived. That meant she was stronger than she appeared. When he stepped into the kitchen, he saw that the plate she had used was washed and placed carefully on the counter. She had cleaned up quietly without being asked. It made Ethan smile a little. It was a small thing, but it showed that she didn't want to cause trouble. He poured himself a cup of tea and looked toward the back door. He wondered if she was somewhere outside, watching him from a distance like she had done before. He didn't want to scare her by calling out suddenly. He needed to move slowly, gently, giving her the space she needed. After breakfast, Ethan stepped out to do his daily ranch work. While clearing branches near the barn, he saw a slight movement near the corner of the shed. A pair of eyes peeked out for a second and then quickly disappeared. He pretended not to notice. He continued working quietly, letting her watch him without pressure. After a few minutes, he spoke softly, not facing her direction directly. "You can come out if you want," he said gently. "You don't have to talk. Just stay nearby if you feel comfortable." There was no answer, but Ethan had the feeling she was still listening. For the next hour, he worked around the same area. He purposely stayed relaxed, showing her he meant no harm. After some time, he heard light footsteps behind him, not close but not far either. He turned slowly. Maya stood there a few steps away, holding the strap of her small bag tightly. Her posture was stiff, but her eyes were calmer than the night before. "You're working a lot," she said softly. Ethan smiled. "The ranch needs it. I'm still learning, but I'll get the hang of it." Maya nodded a little. "You're fixing things." "I'm trying," he replied. "Would you like some water? You don't have to stay long." She hesitated, but after a moment she nodded. He handed her a bottle and stepped back to give her space. She drank it slowly like she wasn't used to trusting anything given to her. But she finished it and handed the bottle back politely. "Thank you," she whispered. "You're welcome." A quiet moment passed between them. Maya looked at the ground, as if she was gathering courage. Then, in a small voice, she said, "I can help. A little, not much. But I can help." "You don't have to," Ethan answered immediately. "I want to," she said, very softly, but with surprising firmness. He nodded gently. "Okay, whatever you're comfortable with." Maya picked up a small broom that was leaning against the barn wall and began sweeping near the entrance. Her movements were slow at first, unsure, but as she worked, she relaxed a little. Ethan didn't say anything. He let her take her time. Hours passed like that. Quiet, simple, peaceful. For the first time since he arrived, Ethan didn't feel alone on the ranch, and for the first time in a long while, Maya didn't seem alone either. When the sun started to set, Maya stepped back, brushing the dust off her clothes. "I should go now," she said softly. "Where will you stay?" Ethan asked gently. She looked toward the barn. "Same place." Ethan nodded. "If you ever want a warm meal, you can come to the house. You don't need to hide." Her eyes softened, but she didn't answer. She simply gave a tiny nod before walking away toward the barn. That night, Ethan couldn't stop thinking about her. She was kind, polite, and quiet. But something about her eyes made him feel she had experienced things she didn't want to talk about. He didn't want to push her. He wanted her to speak only when she felt safe. The next few days followed a similar pattern. Maya kept her distance but stayed close enough to show she was slowly trusting him. She helped with simple tasks, sweeping, organizing tools, handing him small items when he fixed broken boards. After work, she would curl up inside the barn, hidden behind haystacks, as if that small spot was her safe corner in the world. One afternoon, while Ethan was repairing a loose fence panel, Maya walked over and sat on the ground a few feet away. She looked thoughtful, almost lost in her own memories. "Did you live here before I came?" Ethan asked quietly. She nodded. "For how long?" "A few months." Ethan paused. "Why here?" Maya pulled her knees close and rested her chin on them. For a long time, she said nothing. Then, very slowly, she whispered, "I had nowhere else." Her voice held a softness that made Ethan's heart ache. "You don't have to tell me everything," Ethan said gently. "Just say what you want." "I left home," she said, barely above a whisper. "Some things were difficult. I didn't feel safe there. I came here because it was empty, quiet. No one bothered me." Ethan nodded, respecting her decision not to explain further. "You must have been very strong to survive alone," he said honestly. Maya shook her head. "I wasn't strong. I was just trying. That is a kind of strength, too." She looked up at him with surprised eyes, as if no one had told her that before. The days grew warmer. With each sunrise, Maya moved a little closer to feeling safe. She started coming to the kitchen during the day instead of sneaking at night. She ate meals quietly, always finishing only half, as if saving the rest for later. Ethan started cooking more food, pretending he just made too much, so she wouldn't feel like a burden. One evening, while they were cleaning the yard, Maya faintly smiled at a small red flower growing near the fence. It was the first time Ethan saw her smile, even a small one. "It's pretty," she said. "It is," Ethan replied. "Just like the ranch. It just needed someone to notice it." Maya looked at him with confusion, then understanding. Something in her face softened again. Over time, they grew comfortable in each other's presence. They shared small conversations, simple things like the weather, the land, the tasks of the day. Maya still avoided talking about her past, but she laughed once when Ethan accidentally dropped a bucket of water on his own boots. The sound of her laughter was light, gentle, and rare. One night, a sudden storm hit the ranch. Strong winds shook the windows, and rain poured heavily. Ethan worried about Maya in the barn. He put on a jacket and rushed outside with an umbrella, stepping carefully over puddles. "Maya!" he called softly near the barn's entrance. "Are you okay?" From the dim light inside, he saw her small figure sitting on the floor, hugging her bag. The sound of the storm seemed to frighten her. When she saw Ethan, something like relief crossed her face. "You can come inside the house," he said gently. "Just for the night. It's warmer." She hesitated. "I don't want to cause trouble." "You won't," he assured her kindly. Finally, she nodded. Inside the house, Ethan gave her a blanket and some tea. She sat near the fireplace, watching the flames with tired eyes. The warm light made her look younger, softer, like someone who had never stopped hoping deep inside. "Thank you," she whispered. "You're safe here," Ethan said. A long silence followed. Then, in a trembling voice, she finally asked the question she had been afraid to ask. "Are you going to send me away?" Ethan looked at her gently, his voice steady. "Not unless you want to leave. You can stay until we figure out what's best for you." Her eyes filled with quiet gratitude. Maybe no one had ever said those words to her. That night, Maya slept on the couch, wrapped in the blanket. Ethan checked on her from time to time. She looked peaceful for the first time since he met her. The next morning, when the storm cleared, the ranch felt different. Not lonely anymore, not empty. It felt alive, like two people were slowly rebuilding not just a ranch, but themselves. Maya had walked into Ethan's life silently, unexpectedly, and with more strength than she knew. Together, without realizing it, they were beginning a new chapter, one built on trust, kindness, and gentle understanding. They didn't know it yet, but the bond forming between them would change everything that came next. The next few weeks brought a quiet calm to the ranch, the kind that Daniel had never experienced before. Every morning he woke up to the soft sound of wind moving through the tall grass and the gentle clucking of chickens outside. The ranch felt alive again, but this time it wasn't because of the land. It was because of the people who lived on it. Emily and her mother, Sarah, had turned the old house into a warm, lived-in home, and Daniel felt that warmth every time he walked through the door. The biggest change was Emily. The scared girl who once hid in the shadows of the abandoned barn was now smiling brightly, helping Daniel feed the animals and learning small things about ranch life. She was stronger than he had expected, and even though she was still healing, she carried herself with new confidence. Her laughter was soft, but when it came, it filled the whole place. Daniel found himself watching her sometimes as she walked in the sunlight, her hair catching the light, a hopeful look always in her eyes. It made him think about how much she had endured and how much she still had to overcome. He wanted to help her, not because he felt responsible, but because he cared. And Daniel was not someone who formed attachments easily. But Emily and her mother had changed something inside him. One afternoon, as the three of them sat on the porch drinking lemonade, a soft breeze brushing past them, Sarah looked at Daniel with quiet gratitude. She said that Emily had been sleeping better, eating better, and smiling more often. She thanked him again for allowing them to stay, but Daniel shook his head. He said the ranch had felt empty before they arrived. Now it felt like it had purpose. The real challenge came when Sarah admitted they needed to think about the future. They couldn't rely on Daniel forever, and they didn't want to burden him. She talked about finding work, maybe renting a small apartment in town once things settled. But the idea of them leaving made Daniel's chest feel strangely heavy. He didn't show it, but the thought bothered him more than it should have. He didn't want to pressure them, yet he didn't want them to go either. One morning, Daniel took a long walk around the ranch to clear his mind. He moved past the fields, the old windmill, and the barn where Emily had once hidden. It was peaceful, but his thoughts were tangled. He thought about how life had been before they came, a simple routine, predictable, quiet, maybe even lonely. He realized how much fuller his days were now, how much lighter his heart felt. He didn't know what this feeling meant exactly, but he knew one thing. He didn't want to lose it. When he returned to the house, he found Emily sitting at the table, drawing quietly. She looked up and gave him a smile. It was such a small expression, yet it made everything inside him settle. She told him she had drawn a picture of the ranch the way she imagined it could be, a place full of animals, flowers, and people who cared for one another. Daniel looked at the drawing and felt something shift inside him again. Emily saw hope in this place. She saw a future here. Maybe he could too. Later that week, Daniel offered Sarah a solution. He said they didn't have to leave. The ranch was big, much too big for one person to run alone. There were more than enough tasks for 3 people, and he needed help. He told her she could work here if she wanted. He didn't phrase it as charity or obligation. He said it as if he genuinely needed her. Sarah hesitated, unsure if she should accept, but Emily looked hopeful. Eventually, Sarah agreed, saying she could help with cleaning, cooking, and organizing while Emily could help with light ranch tasks as she grew stronger. Life slowly formed a routine again, but this time the routine had laughter, conversations, small moments shared at the dinner table, and new memories forming. Daniel found himself looking forward to evenings when Emily would sit beside him, asking curious questions about horses, or why the sky looked different over the ranch. Sarah became more relaxed, too, often humming while she cooked or tending to small gardens near the porch. Just when everything seemed to be settling, a sudden event tested them again. One late afternoon, while Daniel was fixing a fence near the back pasture, he heard a panicked shout. It was Sarah. He dropped everything and ran toward the house as fast as he could. Emily was outside, sitting on the steps, breathing fast and covering her ears. Something had triggered the old fear inside her, a sudden sound, a memory, something she couldn't explain. Her hands were shaking, and tears filled her eyes. Daniel knelt beside her gently, not touching her, until she gave a sign it was okay. He spoke softly, reassuring her that she was safe, that nothing could hurt her here. Emily nodded slowly, trying to calm down. Sarah sat beside her daughter, holding her hand. That moment reminded Daniel of how fragile healing could be. Even in peaceful places, the past could return suddenly. That night, Emily apologized to Daniel even though she hadn't done anything wrong. She told him she sometimes felt scared for no reason, and she didn't understand why. Daniel replied that healing didn't work in straight lines. Some days would be good, some not so good. And both were okay. He told her she didn't have to be strong all the time, that just living and trying was enough. Emily smiled gently and said she was glad he was there. Her words surprised him, but they also warmed him deeply. As months passed, things slowly improved. Emily's moments of fear became less frequent. She grew braver, more confident, and even more cheerful. She started helping Daniel more with the horses, and she picked up new skills quickly. Sarah became deeply involved in managing the house and keeping things running smoothly. The three of them slowly became a team, almost like a small family. Then something happened that changed everything. One night after dinner, Sarah sat with Daniel on the porch. Emily had already gone inside. The stars were bright above them, and the sound of crickets filled the air. Sarah said softly that she had been thinking a lot about their future. She said Emily had found peace here, real peace. She was happier, safer, and more hopeful than she had been in years. Sarah believed that leaving the ranch would take that away. Daniel listened quietly, feeling his heart beat faster. Then Sarah said something he didn't expect. She told him Emily looked up to him, not just because he helped them, but because she felt safe with him in a way she had never felt before. She trusted him more than she trusted most people. Sarah said she didn't know what the future might look like, but she knew one thing. They belonged here, on the ranch, with Daniel. Those words settled into Daniel's mind like a soft blanket. He looked out at the land he had bought for $1, the land he once thought had no meaning. Now it held everything: friendship, hope, healing, new beginnings. The next morning, Daniel woke with a new sense of purpose. He found Emily feeding the chickens, humming softly. He walked up to her and said he wanted to show her something. They walked to the far side of the ranch where wildflowers grew. The sun was rising, painting the sky in shades of gold. Daniel told her that he thought this place was meant to be her home as much as his. He said she didn't have to hide anymore, didn't have to be afraid, and didn't have to wonder where she belonged. He said she belonged here, with people who cared for her. Emily looked at him with wide eyes, and for the first time, she didn't look lost. She looked certain. She told him the ranch felt like a place where life could start again. Not the life she used to have, but a new one, full of hope. Daniel felt a quiet peace inside him. His decision to buy the ranch for $1 had led him to something far more valuable than land. It had led him to a purpose. It had led him to people who needed him and whom he needed too. The ranch wasn't just land anymore. It was home, for all of them.